Hi, I'm Paige Patterson. I'm in your English Lit class. In this presentation, I'll be talking about metaphysical poetry and breaking that down just a little bit, and then talking about Aemilia Liner's Eve's Apology in Defense of Women, and that sort of stuff. So, in regards to poetry, I remember doing bits of it back in high school and both in English classes in college. I remember breaking down different poems and learning about the writers and having to write a couple myself, which was all interesting. But I never really heard of the term metaphysical poetry before until this class. And when I thought about it, I was like, interesting, metaphysical poetry. That might be about metaphors and comparison and typical stuff you'd find within poems. Kind of similar, or not. So what the term actually means, metaphysical poetry, the word itself refers to after the physical. It was coined by Samuel Johnson, who stated that many writers did not even realize they were part of this form of poetry, and yet all have similarities to one another within their works, which led to them being within this type of genre. So when it comes down to metaphysical poetry, this type of work really talks about those controversial, unknown, and unprovable types of topics that were often discussed within writers' works. These works tend to be mixed with ordinary speech and paradoxes and puns and even humor. They often explored or talked about common themes, ideas, theologies, and that kind of things that were going on around the time. But these poems are always riddled with emotions and feelings and thoughts, and intended to provoke those same responses from the readers. So to delve into Aemilia Liner, she was a daughter of Baptist Manzino and Margaret Johnson. Sorry, I butchered those names. She was born in 1569. She was put in her place in society by her father being a royal musician. She was educated in the household of Susan Burnett, Countess of Kent. She became a mistress of Henry Carey for several years, and when she fell pregnant, she was married off to musician Alfonso Liner, and that was in 1592. She did become the first woman in England to publish her own original poetry within these works known as Slave des Rex Juvenarium. Pardon me if I butchered that as well. Which was pretty amazing that she was the first. She did pass in London, England in 1645. A lot of those poems within her main work would be classified as metaphysical poetry, as they discuss religions and virtues and the maltreatment of women and love itself. Her poem, Eve's Apology in Defense of Women, kind of really struck me when I first looked at our syllabus. I was like, well, that's interesting. I can't wait to read that. It was very intriguing. And as I read it, I was like, this sounds, even for her time and for some in our time currently, it sounds like a very controversial topic that is often overlooked in some, and especially in her time, overlooked completely, and how women were treated. Within this poem, Aemilia is asking, why is it that Eve's mistakes are the ones that are so harshly remembered and blamed for? There's a lot of talk about how Eve betrayed God when she ate the apple, while also overlooking the fact that Adam also ate this apple. Aemilia discusses how it was Adam who possessed this power, and all Eve simply wanted to do was please her husband, as she was of him. And these types of metaphysical ideas was what was found throughout this poem in and of itself and throughout the different stanzas. So now I will delve into Eve's Apology in Defense of Women. I've taken out a couple of her stanzas and discuss them a little bit in detail. Probably for stanzas. So the first one is, let barbarous cruelty far depart from thee, and in true justice take affliction parts. Open thy eyes that thou the truth mayest see. These are just lines. This is just part of a stanza on page 984, lines 9 to 11. And this she's asking for the cruelty to place on women because of Eve be lifted, or shared with men, be true, open their eyes that see that Eve was not alone in her actions, that Adam also took. A next stanza, a little farther down, be surely Adam cannot be excused, her faults though great, yet he was most to blame. What weakness offered, strength might have refused. Be Lord of all, the greater was his shame. So these are lines 33 through 36. She reminds her readers that Adam was the one given the power, as well, of free will, that even though Eve offered him the apple, he had a choice in refusing, yet he still chose to eat the apple that was provided, even though it was a defiance of God in eating it. Another one was, ye having power to rule both sea and land, yet with one apple one to lose the breath, which God had breathed in his venomous face, brings us all in danger and disgrace. This one really breaks into this one, she really reminds us that God was the one who created Earth. He was the one who had this power and created it all, both man and creature and everything around them. And yet, this serpent, this snake, this corruption was still able to get in within the garden and corrupt those that he'd given life to, his creations. And how could that be if he was all great and powerful and wise and on Eve? Another stanza, another piece. Not Eve, whose fault was only much love, which made her give this present to her dear, that what she tastes he likewise might prove, whereby his knowledge might he become more clear. So this is where she's shifting to share the blame. She wants it to be seen that not just her should offer this apple to Adam. She wanted to please him, to help him grow his knowledge. The story goes, she was created from him. God took his rib to create Eve, and so all she wanted to do in her life was please Adam and provide him all she had, which happened to be this apple, which gave her knowledge. And she just wanted to share that. Please the man. In that sense. So the next one. And challenge to yourself no sovereignty. You came not in the world without our pain, that make the bar against your cruelty, your fault to be greater. Why should you disdain your being your equal, free from tyranny? So naturally, as Aemilia was alive late 1600s, early 17, during like the early to mid 1700s, she didn't know that women would where we would be today. She was fighting for women in her time, what was going on with her life, and the similarities that some women fight for still today. But that was what brings this stanza, this question above, about is that we're still paying for the sins, and Eve still pays for these sins in childbirth and the pain, to bring men and women, but we bring men into the world and past that long pain of labor that we were that Eve was charged with for her betrayal. Goes way past just the birth of labor, that women were still not equal, that she was still seen below, and that's my dog. So that is a poem in its entirety. There are a lot of different metaphysical questions and parts that she brings up, in that form of the price Eve or women pay for the ignorance of atoms or men, and their betrayal and own sin, and the ask that women and men both are seen for both sides, that they are seen as equals, that both things that happen are put upon them both and not just one. Which within each of her stanzas, she brings her ideas in such an allegorical way that it doesn't offend, yet it doesn't agree with the masses either. I found this very majestic and alluring, this poem, and others that fit into this category of metaphysical poetry that astound me, because each one of them have so many different meanings, but that are so obvious and yet veiled within them that it's like you can't just read them. You have to like delve into what the meanings are behind them and the words that they choose, and you to bring in your own thoughts, and it changes with each person and their own meanings, as well as what the writer intended. So that was my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. I can't wait to listen to yours. And thanks.